What's up, Stratego brothers? This is OuweSok, and in this episode of Broken Pieces, we'll be looking at the general. If you have seen the previous episode about the marshal, then you will see in this setup statistics a quite similar pattern for the general compared with his big brother. A lot of the times you will find the general in the four squares behind the lakes. Only for the general it is a little lower. So for the marshal it was close to 60%, and for the general close to 55. So about 5% less. You will find them behind the lake, directly behind the lake. The second row is again quite popular, but the difference with the marshal is that for the marshal it was relatively balanced between these six spots, while for the general it has a tendency to appear more in the second row of the center. A significant amount, really. So that's one of the differences with the marshal. Another difference is that the marshal is more prominent in the first row and quite less prominent in the second row. So the general is over 50% in the second row. And yeah, I think that's an interesting difference. Another difference is that you will find the general in the last two rows about 1 in 7 games, while for the marshal it was about 1 in 6. So people tuck away their general in bottom rows less, and they are a little bit more, less protective with the identity of their general. So I think these are the interesting data that we can find from the setups. A little less behind the lake, a little more in the center, and a little less in the last two rows compared to his big brother. Let's talk about the general. If you look at the scouting value of a general, about the impact of knowing the general on a game, it is not really comparable to the impact of knowing the marshal. If the marshal is shown, it sends a big message to the opposite general that he is free at will to attack at any time he wants and be safe. While if the general is shown, there's really no piece that is safe now. Everything can still has some natural enemy hiding somewhere. So the value of finding the general is quite lower than the value of finding the marshal. I would value it about a captain, maybe a little more. So crashing with my captain into your general, I think that's really decently balanced result. What is the impact that the game has when a general is found? What should you do when you have found the general of your opponent? Well, if you find the general of the opponent, then there's one thing that your marshal can be a little bit more liberal to show itself, because you already know the opponent's general, and showing your marshal in that neighborhood and being able to control it has a lot less impact than showing your marshal when you have no idea where the opponent general is. So if you can capture something like a captain and also control and maybe even pin the general of the opponent, that's a fine result for your marshal. So you can be a bit more liberal with your marshal. Also, you can be more liberal with your colonels, because the general is the number one natural enemy of your colonels. And if you have found the general, there's only the marshal that can capture the colonels, and losing a colonel to a marshal is a much lesser deal than losing it to a general, because the scouting value of the marshal is a lot more. So I would try and activate your colonels, find majors to threaten and to capture, and anytime you capture a major with a colonel and lose it to the marshal, that's really a fine result for you, especially now because you will know both the marshal and the general. which is a value variable information. And if you lose your colonel to the marshal capturing a captain, it's still not really terrible. It's not good, but not terrible. Compared to when you capture a captain and lose to the general, that's really a terrible result for your colonel. So yeah, that's the impact that finding the opponent's general has to your game. Be more liberal with your marshal and more liberal with your colonels. Now suppose that you are the one that has shown its general. What should you do? Of course, you must look out for the opponent's marshal. You don't want to be trapped, especially if you're not protected by the spy. So try and put scouts or weak pieces in the vicinity of the general so that the marshal cannot sneak up on him. And hide your majors. That's what I would say. If your opponent is smart enough to understand that he can activate his colonels when he has found your general and go and try to trap a major, then it's a good idea to put your majors in safety and make sure that you do not allow a major to be captured or a major to be captured by a colonel and showing your marshal. Hide your majors. I think that's the thing that you should do if your general has been found, or you have a strategy that early shows your general. One thing about fake protecting, I've seen people protect their general with something that isn't a spy. I think that's generally a really bad idea, because the opponent's marshal should be quite liberal capturing the general, because losing your marshal to a general is not really a big deal. So fake protecting your general with something that isn't a spy when the opponent's piece is really what you think is the marshal, that's a bad idea. I think it's a decent idea to fake protect your general if you think the piece that is threatening you is just a bluff. If you're just pretty sure it came out through the open, could have been scouted like three turns or something like this, and it's coming to menace your general. If you think it's a complete bluff, then it's can be a really good play to counter that by fake protecting your general with a spy and with something that isn't a spy, and then provide false information to your opponent. The last thing I think is should you in your setup place a general close to your spy. I have posted this in a forum, and people are not really a big fan of it. If you've seen various of my games, that you have seen that I have been supporting a first row general in a lot of games, and with my spy really in another place. It's risky, and yeah, sure, it happened that my general got trapped. I've lost my general because it crashed into a marshal when it captured a colonel or major, and sometimes also I lost my general because it got trapped by the 2 square rule. That's just the risk of a setup, and instead of thinking, oh my god, I lost my general, now I'm never going to play the setup again, you must also remember the times which had also happened, that the opponent's marshal starts capturing pieces in another place of the board and runs to your spy, thinking it was a safe place for him to create activity, and in reality it wasn't. So spreading general and spy has its risks and has its benefits, and really these two more or less compensate each other. And I think, as usual in Stratego, the best thing you can do in your setup is be unpredictable. So sometimes your general should be protected by spy, sometimes it can be another place, and both cases have their risks and both cases have their values. And I think you should not be too afraid to separate them. I think a big flaw in the game of bronze players that they have their general walking around and the spy following them like a shadow. That's really a bad idea. Your spy needs to be hidden and not really obvious. So yeah, I think that's I think I could find for you to speak about the general. I hope you find it useful, and as usual, see you in the forums. Bye bye.